We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
Leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
It's a very interesting question.
The Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of the Bubb Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellon Bubb. We're happy that you can join us for this week's edition of the program. Of course, as you're coming into the space, please do us a favor by liking and sharing this week's live stream. And of course, if you're over on our YouTube platforms, please do us a favor by liking and subscribing to our YouTube page. Of course, the Bubb Report is also being aired simultaneously now on WPG10 television. It will also be aired later on that network, as well as on the Grenada Broadcasting Network this Wednesday at 5 p.m. And now we will get straight into it. Now, last week, a partisan firestorm erupted over the Grenada Broadcasting Network's news reporting on Nigerian businesswoman and socialite Aisha Aimugu. Now, Aimugu has been declared wanted by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in her home country of Nigeria. Well, her original home country, I suppose, depending on which country she can claim allegiance to at any given time at this time in her life. Now, we gathered that the EFCC had summoned the socialites to appear at its Port Harcourt office on the 25th of March 2025 over alleged money laundering and high-profile investment scams. Now, there are those like the formerly BBC-trained journalist, now moonlighting as a social media commentator, as well as other surrogates of the ruling party in Grenada, have been calling for a censure of the Grenada Broadcasting Network over their reporting of this story. Now, while I understand that partisans will oppose anyone who may put their government into disrepute, it is a bit surprising that a formerly BBC-trained journalist will call for the muzzling of a free press because he does not like their reporting. I propose that those who live in glass houses should not be throwing stones, especially when said individual is accused of dishonestly appropriating thousands of dollars from a vulnerable and sick man who won a decades-long fight against the previous administration for bulldozing his property in the south of the island. But of course, the commentator here is entitled to his day in court as well over these allegations. Now, has the Nigerian socialite not made a high-profile visit to Grenada and committed to providing scholarships to Grenadian youth? Then this will not be a newsworthy story. Had the socialite not donated school supplies to the Ministry of Education, none of this would be newsworthy. Now, as a reminder, she also threw a lavish 7-day birthday party to mark her golden jubilee at some of Grenada's ritziest properties, with some other high-profile Nigerian and Grenadian movers and shakers in tow. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, she also invited the Grenadian media to cover some of her high-profile shindigs while in Grenada. One of those media that she invited was, of course, the Grenada Broadcasting Network. Now, let us be clear. Ms. Aimugu's alleged actions should never be a reflection of a government's policy, and neither should her connection to Grenada as a CBI recipient. One ought not to connect the two to arrive at some sinister guilt by association. Her actions are hers alone, and to politicize this is also folly. Ms. Aimugu also has not been convicted of any crime, and one's innocence until proven guilty is still the case in Nigeria. Now, if we were to flip the script and the current administration was in the opposition and the NNP was in government, rest assured the opposition would find ways to link the actions of Aimugu with Dr. Mitchell on a mountain of corruption. Now, unfortunately, politics is such that those who campaigned against certain policies or ideologies may find themselves embracing those very same things when they gain power or when it becomes politically expedient. Folks, this is the Bubb Report. We'll be back for the first segment of the program. Please stand by. And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. If you're just coming in the room, please do us a favor by liking and sharing this week's live stream. Now, one of the biggest selling points for citizenship by investment programs in the Caribbean is the enhanced global mobility and access to a strong passport that allows visa-free or on-arrival access to numerous countries, including major countries and hubs in the European Schengen area. Now, in the first quarter of 2025, these programs have been facing scrutiny and potential threats due to concerns about their misuse, or alleged misuse, that is, for money laundering, tax evasion, and other financial crimes. Despite countries like Grenada having due diligence processes in place to vet all applicants. Now, in the United States, the Trump regime announced a new investment-based visa program called the Trump Gold Card, signaling a significant shift in American immigration policy. Now, this proposed visa would offer wealthy foreign investors a direct path to U.S. permanent residency in exchange for a $5 million investment. Now, while details remain sparse, the initiative is positioned as a means to attract high net worth individuals to boost the U.S. economy and address the national debt in that country. And over in Europe, the European Parliament's Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs has voted to approve amendments to EU visa regulations that would explicitly target countries offering citizenship by investment programs that may potentially endanger visa-free access to Europe for numerous countries, including Grenada, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia. Now, these headwinds are bookended by the close to $280 million revenue windfall from the CBI program in 2025 in Grenada. So what will the current and future state of the CBI industry look like in the context of Grenada? Now, here to make sense of these issues is Mr. Thomas Anthony. He's the CEO of Grenada's Investment Migration Agency. Mr. Anthony, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report, sir. It's your first time on the program. Usually Mr. Richard Duncan is here, but you're here this week, so we're happy to have you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bob, to you and your audience. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to inject some factual information into the national discourse.
Yes, absolutely. Now, of course, I sort of opened this volley with the current state of investment migration, is what you call it now. But the current state of the CBI programs and things like that, given the two contexts, what is happening in Europe, what they're doing over there, versus what our neighbors to the north are doing there. Well, they're doing a lot these days. But let us talk about what the Investment Migration Agency in Grenada has been thinking in respect of all of these major geopolitical developments that seem to be targeting the program.
So our neighbors to the north, the Americans, it's been not a very, should I say, level playing field, in that we've been having communication with technicians in the U.S. Treasury Department for more than 2 years, and we've come to some understanding. And one of the examples of coming to that understanding is the 6 principles that were set out. And we have all of the Caribbean countries with CBI programs, we've all set out to implement the 6 principles in our laws and in our rules. The only item that's outstanding is being able to physically retrieve or cancel the passport. And that is difficult for any nation, small or large. And here comes the Trump administration announcing its intent, or rather announcing that they will be putting in place this $5 million gold card to allow individuals access to the US. And so we haven't had any discussions with our US technicians subsequently. So I'm not clear on how that will impact the 6 principles that we've signed on to. And we look to our neighbors, our distant neighbors, the Europeans, the Schengen area in particular. And this particular issue related to adding CBI as a means, as a reason for determining whether or not a country should have visa-free access is not new. It's been at least a year in the making. First, the European Commission announced it last year, perhaps even back in 23, announced that they would have been recommending to Parliament, to the European Parliament, that this be one of the reasons for determining whether or not the country should continue with visa-free access. And we saw what happened with Vanuatu, right? Vanuatu lost its access to the Schengen area for that particular reason. I say that to say that we've been working with the technicians in the Schengen area over more than 2 years now, responding to questions, having the opportunity to have face-to-face discussions. And I'm comfortable that they are perhaps not, well, their concerns are mitigated by the robust nature of our due diligence process. And we continue to dialogue with them.
Yes, sir. Mr. Anthony, you say that the concerns are mitigated, but that does not mean that they will still proceed with this sort of punitive measure that they're engaging with. So while they're telling you that we need you to satisfy these specific variables, here they are still going ahead with threats of well, not threats, but because it's now going to go to the European Parliament. It's now from a subcommittee stage to the European Parliament. So this is sort of a mixed messaging on their part, is it not?
It is. And I have some concerns, but I think the way I think about it is having it as a reason, one of the reasons to end the visa waiver, does not necessarily means that it will get to that stage. In that, if we are in dialogue, if you have shared your concerns, your national security concerns and the other concerns you have shared, and we have addressed those in things like the regional regulator, then there ought not be that level of risk that will cause the European Union to end the visa waiver if we're doing some of the things that they've, or all of the things that they've identified that they have concerns about. That's the way I look at it.
Right now, that as I said in the intro, that is one of the big selling points of the CBI program. It's just, you know, visa-free access by high net worth individuals to places like Europe where they can do business without the need for extra scrutiny with, of course, the United States and Canada and other places. Now, how do you think this is going to impact the program in respect of its attractiveness and long-term viability, given that the U.S. is attempting to tighten screws, as well as Europe is attempting to tighten screws?
Yeah, so the programs have Sanctions is a good example of the fact that the program has been around for more than 3 decades, right? Even before we got Schengen access to Europe. Yes, the access to Schengen area has increased the demand for the program, but in the absence of a Schengen visa, the demand may be reduced, but the programs will continue. But my concern is not really about CBI as it relates to visa-free access. My concern is really about individuals who live here having the ability to travel to these countries that they've become accustomed to do, particularly in countries like European countries, the UK, where they have family and friends that they visit from time to time. So I'm doing everything, we at the agency and at the committee level are doing everything that we can to address those concerns, to try and mitigate as much as possible against visa being implemented.
And what are those things that you're doing?
Okay, so as I mentioned, the regional regulator is one of the big things that the Europeans have mentioned that they must see come to fruition. And you would have seen that the Interim Regulatory Commission, along with the Central Bank, has been in St. Kitts, in Dominica, more recently in Grenada, and last week in St. Lucia. And this week, I believe, or next week, there will be in Antigua. We have upped the timeline to have the legislation ready for tabling in all of the parliaments by this end of this summer. The original deadline we had set was in the first quarter of 2026. But because of the urgency, we have shortened that timeline, that window, and we're seeking to have the full legislation ready for tabling in all of the parliaments by the end of this summer, as I said. And in the regional regulator, there will be some of the, well, all of the aspects that the Europeans have asked to address. So the passport retrieval, for example, more controls over the marketing agents in the various source countries. We will also have the ability to sanction many of the operators for wrongdoing. And we can talk about that in a minute, what that looks like. But the regional regulator will come with the ability to police, not just from a regional level, the agencies or the units that operate these programs, but the stakeholders that operate within the programs, the marketing agents, the local agents, and the developers.
Very well, and that, of course, the regional regulation at the OECS level, that is something that I know that Mr. Duncan on a previous episode of the Bubb Report spoke to. Now, one of the concerns that some citizens have raised as well, and then we're going to segue into the other talking points here, is the e-visa arrangement that Grenada has. I can't remember which one of them. Is it the E2 visa, I believe?
E2, correct.
The E2 visa, correct, that Grenada has with the United States. Now, first and foremost, talk about the benefit of that program. And do you know if anyone who is CBI beneficiaries have actually taken advantage of that program? And has that also been coming under scrutiny by the regime in Washington?
Okay, so the E2 treaty allows Grenadians to invest a minimum of 51% in a US facing entity, and in exchange for that investment, they get a 5-year multiple entry visa. And that visa allows them to reside, to work, and school-age children to go to school in the US. It's different to the green card in that only your business in the US is taxable. Your global income and assets outside of the US under this E2 arrangement will not face US taxes. So it's very attractive. We do know that there are a handful of individuals who would have benefited from the E2 treaty, who would have become citizens under the CBI program. It's not a great number. It's mostly attractive to those coming out of Vietnam and out of China. Unfortunately, about 2 years ago, the US implemented a residency requirement. And so individuals would have to a domicile requirement, not resident, domicile requirement of 3 years. Now, where we are in the negotiations is how is domicility defined? What does domicile mean? Because domicile can be created in law. Residence means physical residence here, but domicile can be created in law. And so that's where we are in terms of agreeing, what does domicile mean? Does it mean you have to be here for the 3-year period? Does it mean you can be here for a few days a year and then you do some other things, contribute to social programs, to paying taxes and those kinds of things? So we're at that stage where we're negotiating what does domicile looks like.
Now, recently, the agency published information concerning, I believe it's the Heng Sheng Group, of selling discounted citizenship application packages. Now, let us talk about the methodology and the process that is followed with respect to how agents, I suspect Heng Sheng would be an agent in this case.
They're a marketing agent.
They're marketing agent, yeah. How do they promote the program? Obviously, there are different ways to promote the program, but let us talk about the work that IMA does in ensuring that the method by which the program is promoted follows those best practices. And how are you able to determine that discounted packages were in fact being offered in this case?
So, very good question, and thank you for that. We have these international due diligence providers that we contract with, and they're part of the overall DD process, and we can talk about that a bit later if you wish. But we have engaged some of them to continuously monitor the market for these kinds of offerings. So they may attend events, industry events. They may do mystery shopping. Yes. And so because they're continuously monitoring the market to ensure that everyone is operating as per the guidelines and the rules, they would have come back to us with reports, with documentary evidence that the discounting is taking place. And the form of discounting as it relates to the Heng Sheng marketing group, it's particular to the Grenada National Resort, that project in the north, where the owner is offering a loan to the applicants of $100,000. And so effectively, the applicants will then only pay $170,000 because for the project, those who choose the investment option of projects, it's $270,000 to the developer and $50,000 to government. So what we've found is the developer offers a loan of $100,000 to the applicant. The applicant is then technically paying $170,000. Now that is clearly below the not just the price for the investment in a project, but the agreed price floor that we all set in the Caribbean of $200,000. So it's a violation of the investment amount, and it's a violation of the minimum price floor. And so we said to them, when we discovered that you cannot, as the developer, be lending individuals money to invest in your development. If you have that money, then by all means invest it in the development so that the development progresses faster, rather than lending it to individuals who are expected to invest the $270,000 plus the $50,000 to government.
So is the Schengen? What I hear you saying here is that they are an investor, but they're also a marketing agent.
Okay, so
are they serving dual functions here? Because they're the ones who are doing the work up at Levera. So
yes, so they have
explain.
two entities. They have the Grenada National Resort Project. So that's an approved project, approved in the sense of they're able to go out, find investors to invest in the project, to build the project, to build out the project. And then they have a marketing arm to help them to market that project to potential investors. So Heng Sheng is the marketing arm, and the Grenada National Resort is the development.
I see. Now let us talk about the local agents, and this question just came to me. The local agents who work with Heng Sheng, how were they involved in all of this?
They were not involved.
They were not involved. So
they were not involved.
Can you articulate the role of the local agents here in the due diligence process? Okay. Because I know that the local agent, they attract a potential investor, and yes, this is my understanding of it. Then they work with, I believe, one of the local banks, and the banks do their clearance. Yes. And I believe after that, once the bank is cleared, then I believe they approach you. Is that correct?
That's
they approach the IMA, right?
That's
so
correct.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand here, if at some point the local agents who were working with Heng Sheng, if they were involved, if they missed anything in respect of what they were supposed to be doing for due diligence.
Well, I'll tell you how it works, and then you can make a determination whether or not they missed anything. In our assessment, they have not missed anything, because all of this offer took place outside of the country. And when the documentation comes in, it's a purchase of the property, a share in the property for the $270,000. The local agents do not see the $100,000 loan offer. That happens outside of us. But essentially, there are three main stakeholders. You have the marketing agent, the local agent, and the developer. The marketing agent are individuals and entities licensed who operate outside of us in terms of not being resident here, not having an office here, but having offices in the source countries, such as Dubai, Lagos, China, and such like. They are authorized to market and promote the program and to seek investors to bring to the program. You have the local agents, and those must be OECS nationals ordinarily residing in Grenada. And the marketing agent cannot submit an application directly to the agency. The marketing agent must use a local agent to represent their client before the agency. And then you have the developers, and the developers such as Range with the Six Senses Project, Intercontinental Project, Silver Sands, which is Silver Sands Beach House. Before that, you have the Point at Petit Calavini. These projects are licensed or authorized to raise finance under the program, and the individuals who invest in these projects apply for citizenship. There's another route, which is the National Transformation Fund, which is a contribution of $235,000 direct to government. So you have option one, the National Transformation Fund, or option two, an investment in a project. Historically, about 30% of the applicants choose the National Transformation Fund. So the marketing agents assist the applicant in putting their application together. They would do their own KYC to determine whether they'll onboard that applicant. They will then have to come to a local agent to ask that local agent whether or not they will onboard the client, and the local agent will also do their own KYC to determine whether they will onboard. Once they determine they will onboard that client, they then have to submit a bundle of documents to the bank, including source of funds, source of wealth, and such like. The bank will conduct its own KYC, and only after the bank approves or after the bank determines that they will accept funds from this applicant, can the local agent submit the application to the agency. The agency in turn conducts its own due diligence, and it includes DD partners such as the FIU. So all of the pertinent information is sent to the FIU. FIU in turn sends it to the JRCC, which is a Joint Regional Communication Center in Barbados, which is a sub-agency of Caricom Impacts. Caricom Impacts, in short, having responsibility for border security across Caricom. But we also have, as I said earlier, contracted international due diligence providers, and they do a combination of online research, but more importantly, on-the-ground human intelligence investigations. And they do things like knock on the door of the address, the reported address, to ensure that the person lives there. They also ensure that the reported employer is indeed the employer, and not just the employer, but it's an operating business and can afford the kinds of salaries that they're reporting, things like that. They also check with the legal system to ensure that the individual has no criminal record, has no civil outstanding legal matter, no criminal outstanding legal matter, and as much as they're able to, whether or not the individual is under investigation. Now, you will not know that in all stages, because not all investigating entities would want that information to leak outside of them for fear that it may get back to the subject of the investigation. But there are cases where you can. They have access to Europol, Interpol, the various sanctions list. So a very comprehensive report is done and submitted to us. But I will say here, if the FIU comes back to us with one of two responses, cleared or not cleared. In all instances where the applicant is not cleared, it's an automatic denial, notwithstanding what the IDD provider would have come back with. Even if they come back with a low risk report, the fact that FIU says not cleared means the applicant is automatically denied.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that very detailed. But let us finally talk about sanctions. So has there been any case where any of the local agents here were found to be in a foul of their processes, their marketing? Has there been any, for example, dubious marketing schemes that you have been able to uncover?
Not local agents, but marketing agents, and we've removed them. So we have a peculiar process of listing agents. So
well, I should say general agents. Please explain the process for us.
Yes. So we license the marketing agents, but the legislation allows marketing agents to then license what they call sub-agents. Now we have moved to a stage where we demand that they register those sub-agents. It did not happen before, that they register those sub-agents with us. And what we found is some of the sub-agents have been guilty of violating our rules in terms of the language that they use in the marketplace, the claims that are made, and so some have been sanctioned. We've demanded that the marketing agent under which they're listed remove them as a sub-agent. So yes, we have taken action on some.
But they are sub-agents. Why is it that the marketing agents are not doing the work who they have subcontracted to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? And how are you not sanctioning the actual agents? Because the marketing agents should know what their sub-agents are doing at all times.
Quite right. And this is why we are taking the stance that we're taking with Heng Sheng, because the offers are really from the sub-agents, right? But essentially it comes from Heng Sheng and it's under their control. And this is why we're taking the action that we're taking with them in regard to this owner financing and discount.
Now, there's also been allegations that they have also been allegedly here posing as ambassadors to Singapore. Is that inaccurate?
I don't know. I'm not a politician. I'm not a politician. I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
But I have no idea about that.
Okay, very well. Now let us talk about the Levera construction that's happening there. Of course, that project, that CBI project, in many respects, it's the poster child for something that is really grotesque. Really, quite frankly, many Grenadians do not like it. The fact that it's being constructed on a site that is supposed to be earmarked for environmental protection. It's constructed in a place where the turtles nest, right? There's going to be so much light pollution there. And the design that they had for this thing is just anachronistic to the infrastructural facade that Grenada is familiar with. So what is going to be happening with that particular site there now that the Heng Sheng has been, and I know that you made the distinction between the two here, the developers versus the marketing agents.
Mm-hmm.
What is there going to be any stoppage of work there? What is going to be happening with that site?
Well, we're not intending for the work to stop. We're intending for them to adjust their behavior and bring the pricing into regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So the intention, as I said, is not to stop the project. It can be an important project for the North to bring some much needed economic activity in the North. What I will say here is before CBI approval is granted, the developer must get approval from physical planning, right? And so we don't treat with those issues that physical planning would treat with. We allow the developer to go through that process, and once they get approval, conditional approval, then we look at them and assess the viability and feasibility of the project. Now, it's a project I inherited.
Yes, of course. Yes, I know that you inherited that one. So
yeah.
A lot of the blows may not be directly at you. In fact, it started under the previous administration with, at the time, we believe, Mitchell and Co. Allegedly was one of the marketing agents for that. So again, I think it's important to make that point. Let us go on to talk about, of course, I think we addressed so many issues here. Now, the question of the lowering of the fees. You're jumping the gun there. The lowering of the fees, the lowering of the fees for to have Grenadian developers get involved in this process. Now, one may argue that there are mechanisms by which Grenadians, indigenous Grenadians, let's call it that,
mm-hmm.
can get involved in investment in Grenada. It is called the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
So how does this, what you're attempting to do here, not upend the work of the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation in respect of fostering local investment? And then we also have the Grenada Development Bank that incentivizes entrepreneurs and things like that by offering loans. So can you articulate what you're doing here that's different from the incentive structures that are already available for Grenadians to get involved in investment in their own country?
This will not get in the way of these existing programs, as you laid out, IDC and Development Bank. What this does is allow local Grenadians to have access to CBI applicants, so that those two programs do not have a pathway to being approved as a CBI project. And many of the individuals, Grenadians that we've spoken to about wanting to be able to attract investment from CBI investors, have noted that the barrier to entry is the cost. So prior to this legislation, or in the main, the developer will have to have 20% of the equity to put into the project. Yes, and then the cost can be considerable in terms of the due diligence fees, the processing fees, etc. So in an effort to allow Grenadians to have access to CBI investors at a reduced cost, government decided to make this amendment to the legislation to carve out a space for indigenous Grenadians. So the cost will be about 30% of what is the cost to other developers who would come to us for an approved project. So it doesn't replace GIDC and the bank. As a matter of fact, we'll be working in tandem with GIDC to help them to put their proposals together and help walk them through the process of having a good project proposal that can be presented to potential investors.
Very well, very well. So thank you for clearing that up. And a slight correction on my part, and I acknowledge when I said the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation. Again, I'm analog here. Apparently, the name was changed to the Grenada Investment Development Corporation. So I stand corrected. Thank you there to Mr. Grimes for that correction. And I'm not, I don't have all of that pride to acknowledge when I'm wrong, but right. So let us go on. We will get to some viewer questions. Now, and before we get to the Aimugu issue, let us talk about the prospects, the revenue earning prospects for your agency in 2025, given the context and background of everything that we just articulated.
Okay, so I'll go back a little bit. In 2023, we had a fantastic year because of the Russian applications, right?
Yes.
Grenada being the only country for a period of time accepting Russians. And so we had about 2,000 applications registered, which we went through in 23 and in 24. So in 23, I believe we had direct revenue to government of about 400 million, more than 400, about 453 million. And in 2024, we exceeded 500 million. That's not going to be the case in 2025 because our application number dropped significantly in the absence of accepting Russian applications. So I believe we got about 420 applications as opposed to 2397 in 2023, right? So you see that difference there. So this year, I believe our revenue is going to be closer to 200 million rather than 400 million because we have some spillover from the 2024 applications, which will spill over into this year. And this year, we're targeting about another 400 to 500 applications. So we're looking at a revenue of about 200 million EC dollars direct to government. That does not include the investment in the projects, right? Which create jobs at construction phase and jobs at the operational phase, and then the spillover into the economy of that money being spent in the economy.
And what are some of your strategies for targeting other diverse areas of the world outside of Europe and I suppose North America? And have you been seeing, of course, and this is an interesting bit of anecdote that I've been following myself, that many Americans, given everything that's happening in the United States, are running for the hills. Are they running for the hills in Granny Tang as well, sir?
Well, we have
By
seen
applying for,
we've seen an uptick in applications out of the US, and 3 of our biggest marketing agents have tripled their footprint in the US over the last year because they've seen that uptick, right? And so we target the market in collaboration with these marketing agents. So we attend events in the US, industry events, but also events organized by the marketing agents to talk directly to their potential applicants. Why Grenada? We also do a similar thing in London, in Dubai. Dubai is a major hub for applicants from all over the world, India, Pakistan, you name it, and they're there. And we also attend marketing agent organized events in Lagos, in Abuja, and in other parts of the world. This year, we're going to do a West Africa tour to try and increase the numbers coming out of those countries. But we have a program, a marketing program that's approved year prior to implement in this year. And it includes going to industry events, again, attending marketing agent organized events, but also attending non-industry events, but investment related events to try and target some of those high net worth individuals.
And the last time Mr. Duncan was on the Bubb Report, he spoke about attracting. I still have qualms with respect to how this methodology is determined by determining the Forbes list of high net worth individuals by attracting, by sort of having a fast track investment.
Wow. Okay, you're talking about the citizenship by invitation.
By invitation, correct? Yes. Correct. Yes.
So
that still does not make sense to me, sir. You're just going to look at Forbes and say, I will invite X person X or person Y to come to Grenada. I'm sure Grenadians don't want Elon Musk to becoming a citizen of their country.
Well, put it this way, Dr. Bob. The beginning point, the starting point is the Forbes list. And one must have more than $30 million in net worth, to be considered. An invitation is sent out to the individuals. If they respond in the affirmative, they then have to go through a marketing agent. In this case, it's Art and Capital. And Art and Capital will take them through that process I laid out earlier. So they'll do their KYC and decide whether they'll onboard them. They'll look for a local agent to partner with. That local agent will do their KYC. The bank will do their KYC. And once it gets to us, we will still do the due diligence, go through the same due diligence process as we would for every other applicant. The only difference with the citizenship by invitation, 2 things. One, their applications will be prioritized. So if A and B comes in and A and B is one of the invitation applications, it gets above B in terms of processing. And the second thing is an annual audience with the Prime Minister in Grenada in a 2-day conference. But the due diligence process is the same.
Okay. It is the same. Okay. All right. So they're following the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And finally, and then we'll get to some viewer comments because we have to get to the next segment. Let us talk about one Aisha Aimugu. Of course, she came to Grenada with great fanfare last year. She had I believe it was a 7-day blitz on the island, where she also declared that she was a proud Grenadian national as well, by investment. She donated supplies, school supplies, and even committed to offering scholarship opportunities. Obviously, we have to caveat this by saying that governments are not responsible for the individual actions of people. So I don't know why this first and foremost is being politicized, but certainly it is a newsworthy story Given the high-profile nature, this lady invited the media to her events. So therefore, the media who covered her, if they were not doing any follow-up on this, it would be journalistic malpractice, quite frankly, if this woman invited you to an event and you did not follow up in respect of what is happening to her now. So let us talk about the due diligence process that was followed around her, and was anything missed in that process by perhaps the agents who attracted her to Grenada in the first place?
Okay, so in the main, we don't ordinarily give out information on applicants and subsequently citizens. But as you've laid out, given the circumstances and the fact that Aimugu identified herself as a Grenadian by CBI means, I will share some information. So the application came to us in July of 2021. And it went through that process that I laid out earlier. The marketing agent, the local agent, the bank, the agency, FIU, independent due diligence providers. And in November 2021, she was approved after having gone through that process, right? As I understand it, her Nigeria-based agent did not absconded with her investment money. So she paid the agent, intending that the agent pay to the developer. That was range development, her investment, once she was told that she was approved, because that's the process. You have to first be told you're approved, and then you make the investment, and then you get your citizenship documents. So it took her about a year, more than a year, to either try to get the money back from the agent or to get him to make the payment. When that failed, she made the investment herself a second time, but directly to the developer. So she did not get her citizenship documents until, I believe it was April of 2023, because of that issue. And yes, in the interim, there was this EFCC investigation, but she was not the main target of the investigation. It was someone who was a governor. I can't recall the name. I can share that with you sometime later. Who was the target, and she was one of two people from whom he was buying property. And so her name was called as part of the investigation, but not a subject of the investigation. And I believe this is why all of the agencies determined that she did not represent a risk at the time.
At the time, right, because she was not a direct subject of the investigation.
Exactly. And this is coming after the fact. And so I think we have to treat it in that vein. How do we treat with a Grenadian who may be using the Grenadian passport to evade or avoid a regulator or law enforcement or intelligence agency in a third country? And so I think that's how we treat with it. It's not the fact that she's a CBI applicant, but the fact that she's a Grenadian, wanted for questioning. And remember, you have said she's not charged with anything, but wanted for questioning in her home country. And what can we do to ensure that she presents herself to that entity who needs her for questioning? Does it mean canceling the passport and so reducing her ability to travel, right? Or does it mean something else? But that is for government to decide.
And a determination of if in fact there is an extradition treaty between Nigeria and Grenada. And again,
Well, Dr. Bob, my understanding is that she's in London, not Grenada.
Okay. No, I'm saying she might not be in Grenada, but she might be carrying that Grenadian passport.
Yes.
Or she might be frolicking in the Schengen area for all we know, with everything that's happening with Europe now. I'm just making that point. But let me. There is one final question that came in here, and that has to do with I believe the Burmese. Let me pull it up here. The Myanmar arms dealer, that's Mr. Naik Huit Ang. Is he any way affiliated with Grenada in any way? I believe one of his companies was sanctioned by the United States. Of course, he's part of the military junta in Myanmar.
I believe I think I treated with this before. I think he did get citizenship, but I think his citizenship was revoked.
It was revoked. Okay,
it became known, yes, that he was, involved in arms
dealing.
Arms dealing. Yes.
Correct. Okay. Very well.
Yes.
All right. So let's get to some viewer comments here. So again, this application by Ms. Aimugu was in 2021, folks. 2021. Yes. Again, this should not be politicized. July of 2021.
It was submitted, and November 2021, it was approved.
It was approved in November of 2021. So for those who want to frame this around electioneering,
it has nothing to do
that has nothing politics. To do. That's a totally moot point here, right? So let's go. Let's go to some. Margaret Francis saying a well-rounded report on the Aimugu affair should include what has been reported in Nigeria, that the warrant is politically motivated because she reportedly channeled funds to the opposition. Nigerian NGOs have also spoken about the process for issuing the warrant. I don't know the woman, and I don't really care, but I do care about the fairness in reporting. Margaret, we can agree to that. There's no disagreements there. Let's get to some other jobs.
Dr. Bob, if I may just...
Yes, go ahead, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Interject. My information is from someone close to her, a Grenadian who works for her.
Yes.
Is that she went to London for medical reasons before the invitation was extended to appear before
that commission.
Yes.
Yes.
Her lawyers are in conversation with them in terms of her return.
Okay.
And when she would appear before them.
Yes, all right. For CBI to thrive in Grenada, it's essential that we prioritize transparency, conduct rigorous due diligence, and focus on sustainable revenue generation. What measures can we implement to guarantee our policies are transparent and effective? Well, I think, Mr. Anthony, you have articulated a lot of what you've been doing here. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here in respect of that.
And also we have these quarterly symposium in the various areas of Grenada. Yes. We had 3 in 23, we had 3 in 24. We intend to have about 4 this year, and they're broadcast live as well as on social media.
Absolutely. Another viewer is saying we have been seeing that India and China are doing lots of marketing in the Caribbean and Africa. Would we be seeing our CBI program targeting more Indian, Chinese, and African businessmen, knowing what is happening with the Trump administration that changes things every day or is unpredictable?
And that's the issue, right? The unpredictability, because we do have an advantage through the Caribbean Basin Initiative. And as we go to these various events, we talk about this Caribbean Basin Initiative, but we don't know if it will survive, the next day or the next, because of how
schizophrenic, very schizophrenic, very mad king. For those of you Game of Thrones fans. We have another viewer comment. My question is that since the gold card was introduced by the US president, I'm hearing that the e-visa will be no more. Question, how would that affect countries that depends on the CBI program to the development of the economy and the funding of their budgets?
Okay, so it will not affect the E2 visa. I think that's what the writer wanted to say. What they're saying is that it will end the EB5, which is a different program. So the EB5 is America's investor program, which gives individuals, I think it's $900,000, and they have to invest in an entity that creates jobs, 10 jobs at a minimum, and they get the green card, which then lead to citizenship eventually. That's the one that they're saying that the gold card will replace, but not the E2 treaty.
I see. Margaret Francis again is saying, how comprehensive is that vetting process if we continue to get crooks and shysters? Seems to me like every Monday morning, another crook associated with CBI emerges from the woodwork. I think Margaret is trying to suggest that perhaps your due diligence is not as ironclad, maybe?
I would like Margaret to name those crooks that come up, because in the time I've been here, there have only been two. That is Aimugu, and it's questioning, right? Remember,
Yes.
she's not charged with anything. And it was the Burmese who was involved in arms dealing.
Correct.
Those are the only two that I'm aware of. So, and we've done thousands of them. Over the decade of the program, we've done thousands of applications.
I see. And we have a comment. We have a comment from Bran Francis here. Bran, it's good to have you. Bran, we will be having a full-throated CBI panel at some point in the future. Hopefully, I'll be inviting Mr. Anthony back. Mr. Anthony, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mr. Bran Samuel.
I am quite so.
Well, we all need to go have a drink at Six Senses when I visit Grenada in May. But it says it's nonsense that the government only gets 50K while the developer gets 270K. We the people are getting a pittance while foreign so-called investors get rich off our backs. If we must continue selling our patrimony, then the nation should get all the money to improve the lives of all Grenadians. Okay, so my response to that is recall that there are two options from which the applicant can choose. One is a direct contribution to government, which is $235,000. So that goes directly to government coffers. And the second one is the investment in the developer, in the project, where it's 270 to the developer and 50 to the to government. Now, the issue is that the intent is for the project to be constructed. So that money is to be used to develop the project. So we saw successful development in the Point at Petit Calvini. We saw Six Senses. Intercontinental is almost finished. We saw Silver Sands Beach House, which was fully funded under the program. So that's the intent. Hideaway, which is student accommodation down at the university, was built under the program as well. So the money is intended to create economic activity, construction jobs, operational jobs. Very well. Mr. Anthony, we do have to get to the next segment of the program. So kindly give us an opportunity now for some closing comments, sir. Is there anything else that you want to articulate that we did not speak about this morning? Well, I just want to say, that the programs across the region are an important source of non-tax revenue. Last I heard from the governor in January of this year, he reported that 75 cents of every dollar of non-tax revenue comes from CBI receipts. That's how important and integral it is to the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. And I just want us to think about that as we engage in national discourse about the program. Can the program be improved? Of course, everything can be. But to talk about its disappearance in the absence of any other revenue source could be disastrous for us. So let's have some objective conversations about how we can improve the program so that it has longevity. And thank you, Dr. Bob, for having me. Brevity is your strong suit, sir. Not mine, yours. So thank you for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. And so we will be inviting you back because we do want to have a full-throated panel segment at some point as we follow closely what is happening with respect to the EU and with respect to the United States in attempting to sort of put a dent in the program, if you will. So thank you again, sir. Thank you. Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, this is the Bubb Report. We'll be back for the second segment of the program, and we will be discussing how the regime's tariffs in Washington will be affecting your pocketbook and your bottom line in an era when we already have heightened inflation, so much so that the sticker shock here in the United States. I went to my local supermarket just yesterday, and I kid you not when I tell you the price of eggs is almost $10. And in fact, that dozen carton is now split in two. And the cost of half a carton of eggs, the 6 eggs, is the price of what it was is the price of what a dozen carton of eggs looks like. So we'll be having that conversation with Dr. Entwine. He has returned to us. And later, for those of you who have been following the Creators Alliance Ponzi scheme, boy, do we have a segment for you to unpack. So stay tuned for that segment on the Ponzi scheme that swindled so many Grenadians out of thousands, not only Grenadians, pretty much they were all over the Caribbean, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars. Stay tuned, folks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.
Should your loved ones pass on?
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific Section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
My fellow Singaporeans, I've said before that the world is changing in ways that will disadvantage small open economies like Singapore. Some had previously questioned this assessment, but the recent Liberation Day announcement by the US leaves no room for doubt. It marks a seismic change in the global order. The era of rules-based globalization and free trade is over. We are entering a new phase, one that is more arbitrary, protectionist, and dangerous. For decades, the US was the bedrock for the free market economies of the world. It championed free trade and led efforts to build a multilateral trading system, anchored by clear rules and norms, where countries could achieve win-win benefits through trade. This WTO system brought unprecedented stability and prosperity to the world, and to the US itself. To be clear, the system is not perfect. Singapore and many others have long called for reform to update the rules and to make the system better. But what the US is doing now is not reform. It is abandoning the entire system it had created. Its new approach of reciprocal tariffs, country by country, is a complete rejection of the WTO framework. The US has placed Singapore in the lowest base tier with a tariff of 10%. So the direct impact on us may be limited for now, but there are wider and more profound consequences if other countries.
And folks, that was, of course, the Prime Minister of Singapore sounding the alarm about the implications of the Trump tariffs. Now, in Washington's idealized framing, the United States was at its zenith in the 1890s, when billionaire top hats and shirt swats were fashionable, and typhoid fever often killed more soldiers than combat. It was the golden age, the gilded age, if you will, a time of rapid population growth and transformation from an agricultural economy toward a sprawling industrialized system, when poverty was widespread, while billionaire robber barons of phenomenal wealth, like the Rockefellers and JP Morgans, and of course the Texas oil magnates, held tremendous sway over politicians who often helped boost their financial empires. That was in the Gilded Age. That was back then. We are seeing a repeat of history now. Now, the desire to recreate that era of the Gilded Age is fueled by the American leaders' fondness for tariffs and his admiration for the nation's 25th president, William McKinley, who was also a Republican, who was in office from 1897 until being assassinated in 1901. Now, fast forward to 2025, and the American dare leader, and I use dare leader here in close quotes, who seemingly wants to employ the same McKinley playbook, will find that the world has changed and that American hegemony may actually be on the decline. Now, the tariff the U.S. is placing on other countries is equal to the U.S. trade deficit divided by U.S. imports from any given country, divided by 2 or 10%, or whichever rate is greater. So even if the United States has no trade deficit or a trade surplus with a country, they still receive a minimum tariff of 10%. Now, as an example, if the United States imports $100 million worth of goods and services, while exporting $50 million worth of goods and services to country X, let's say Grenada, then the regime in Washington alleges that country X levies a 50% tariff on the United States, which is the difference between 100 million and 50 million divided by 100 million. Now, the reciprocal tariff put into effect last Wednesday would be half of that, or 25%. Now, many experts have argued that the formula for the tariffs, originally credited to the Council of Trump's economic advisors and published by the Office of the United States Trade Representative, does not make economic sense. They say that the trade deficit with a given country is not determined only by tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers, but also by international capital flows, supply chains, comparative advantage, and geography. But even if we were to take the administration's tariff formula seriously, it makes an error in that it inflates the tariffs assumed to be levied by foreign countries fourfold. Now, as a result of these tariffs imposed by Washington, they're also highly inflated. Now, of course, with the announcement last week, it was also interesting that the regime in Washington also placed tariffs on the remote Heard and McDonald's Islands, and they are Australian external territories in the southern Indian Ocean, which was hit with a 10% tariff. Now, both islands are inhabited by penguins, folks. Now, here to make sense of the tariffs' impacts on your pocketbook in Grenada and in the Eastern Caribbean is our returning guest. As I said, we'll be having Dr. Antoine here a lot these days, given the very uncertain geopolitical times in which we live in. And now we want to welcome Dr. Antoine to the Bubb Report. Dr. Antoine, welcome back to the program, sir. And I want to begin this conversation with this quote. And it says, above all, tariffs gives Donald Trump power. They strike fear into allies and enemies, from governments to corporations, unquote. And this is a quote from The Guardian this week in the Guardian editorial. So is this what this is about? Will the Caribbean now be going as a conga line of sycophants at the feet of Trump, groveling for him to remove the tariffs on you all? Because that's what many are saying that's what it is.
Yeah, so let me thank you for having me back and smilingly say that I think you made a slip. You mean for us all?
For us all, correct. For us all, yes.
Look,
I stand corrected.
Truth is that I think the way that the heads of government have been handling this matter up till now, because as you well know, really it is in the minds of politicians to do what they deem best at any point in time. But up till now, the heads have been coordinated in terms of their own response to this matter with the United States and the United States government. There is no question that the Caricom countries, while hearing this during the campaign, were surprised at the way in which it was instituted, one. Secondly, that Caricom governments and the Caribbean countries at this time are a little uncertain. What you said in terms of the quote is absolutely accurate. But I think there's one word that comes in there, which is uncertainty. So you're not certain whether there's room for negotiation, because you hear that one half an hour earlier, and then half an hour later, you hear that there's going to be no change. So I think we are in uncertain times for all of those reasons. And my opening salvo is that it will have profound implications on Caricom countries for various reasons that we can get into. But we are in uncharted waters, because we've not been here since we started the Bretton Woods institutions. And I started working on these matters in 1985, before the WTO. This is absolutely a sea change in terms of the way that we've looked at things. On multilateralism now, it's completely bilateral. And unfortunately, we don't know what the true levers are that drives a lot of this. And in your formula explanation, I think you were clear on that.
Yeah, I had to go back to my economics A-level days. Mr. Frederick and Mr. Tunde would be proud of me that I was able to take on some of that. But do you have a sense, is this sort of this a flat penalty, if you will? What sectors would be impacted most? Or is it everything here, that we're talking about? If we look at the basket of goods, for example, are all of the basket of goods going to be impacted here? What would that be looking like for the average consumer, the average parent, the average grandparent on a fixed income in Grenada who is going into the supermarket, or who might need a particular service, or who might need, for example, to have their barrels shipped from the United States? So what would that be looking like?
All right, so let's
because Grenada is 10%.
Let's take it broader before I think we take it narrower.
Yes.
If we were just to look at Grenada, while we take it broadly, let's look at Grenada in terms of where the impacts are going to be. So I think, first of all, the impacts are going to be in terms of the cost of imports. But it's often misappreciated that while we export just about 10% to the United States, we could also see some of our exports impacted as well, not just from the tariff side, but also from any intermediate input that we import from the United States that go into the composition of those goods going into the US. So that's on the sort of export side. On the import side, clearly the prices are going to go up. And let me give you the top several items that we have to be concerned about. So we have, for instance, flour of wheat, poultry, other food preparations. We have corn or maize. We have other breads, pastry, cakes, biscuits. We have beef and pork. We have malt in terms of what goes into the brewing at the Grenada Breweries Limited. We have potatoes. We have cereals and sausages, shrimps. All of those things are going to be impacted for the reason that Grenada imports about 36% of our imports come from the United States. And I want to put this other point in because we are at the CPSO, my colleagues and I, deep in the analysis phase. But I can tell you this already. If we say that another 40 or so % comes from Trinidad and Tobago as the largest, intra-regional supplier or exporter of goods, then you have to look at what are all of those things that are imported into Trinidad and Tobago as intermediate inputs that make final products, for instance, sausages, that we then import. So it's not sufficient to stop at what we import from the US. We also need to see what are the US's composition of imports from other places that will find its way into our markets. And of course, then we need to look at the impact on other countries that we import from, that tariffs have been placed on into the United States, and see how that's going to impact them. So there are a number of things, for instance, that have been from China. Less than 5% on our side, we don't see a big impact there. But if there are things that other countries import from China, we could see impacts there too. So I'm simply saying that I think that the list of items I've called out. I mean, you have students, they like Haagen-Dazs. We're likely to see again some pass-through effects for some of those things. So that's really on that side. So the reason I've mentioned this is because a lot of these things actually don't just originate in the US, they come from Canada. Lots of meats and so on come from Canada. In fact, many of the things I like, I'm vegetarian, right? Canada is the bastion of providing a lot of those things, but through the US. So we're likely to see some impacts there. But there are other impacts I think you want to get onto, not just on the import side and the export side, because there are other major impacts I think we're going to see in our country.
So, and can you speak to those major impacts? But before we speak to those major impacts, can you talk about any conversations that you've been having around the supply chain? Because while many goods that we import may not necessarily come from the US, although a lot do, a lot of the shipping lanes are routed through major ports in the US, such as in Florida, for example. Tropical shipping has a major activity there as well. So, and of course, the whole question of Chinese vessels and all of that is part of this equation as well. And we can talk about the tariffs that they imposed on China with China's retaliatory tariffs and all of that. But let us talk about how supply chains, conversations you'll be having with them, because I believe that is an impact as well that we have to consider. And that would also affect cost as well.
It's a major impact that we have to look at. And so I'm going to answer that in two ways again, because I think our population needs to know that we're no longer facing one threat at a time. They're coming in bunches, right? So the first part of that is that it is not easy to reorient supply chains in the short run. So I think, unfortunately, we're going to see some of that. So, for instance, we have one of our major conglomerates in the Caribbean that provides a lot of food into the region through supermarkets. They've set up a massive distribution and consolidation center in the United States from whence they ship everything. So they pull it in there, they ship it out. So tropical shipping and entities like that are going to continue in the short run, providing these services out of there. And I'll answer the second part just now. But these supply chains could be reoriented to other countries in the medium term. Medium term could be sped up because of what's happening with people losing competitiveness. Medium term is not as we knew it 10 years ago. Everything, because of Trump's initiatives, are moving at warp speed. So medium terms, I have to tell you, some firms have actually put any major decision on changing anything while they reconfigure supply chains for the next sort of 2 to 3 months. That's their risk mitigation strategies that they perfected during COVID, right? So I think after that, you're likely to see some major shifts. So in terms of medium term, what I'm talking about today, from a private sector perspective, is 2 to 3 months. Do I now start setting up arrangements in Panama so things can come into Panama and not have to go into US ports, come from Panama to the region? They're going to have to do that in the medium term to mitigate costs, because these sort of unprecedented cost increases that we're likely to see are not going to be easy. But the second part of that is, not forget last week we spoke about what the US's measures on China-built ships could look like. Now, if you take the US's measures on China-built ships that they're going to make announcements on somewhere around April 17th, and we're hoping that, having regard to the announcements on the reciprocal tariffs, the measures that come on the 17th are not as restrictive as we've been modeling. But whatever comes on top of that, save and except they accede to the position from Caricom that we're exempted, then now has to be compounded with what they've done on the 10% tariffs going into them. And we're likely to see some major shifts in supply chains, answering your question specifically, because no one will be able to pay the 1.5 million if they have a China-built ship by going into a US port. So that's likely to speed up the shift or the movement or reorientation of supply chains much more rapidly than otherwise. So there are two driving forces that will see supply chain shift, and our private sector in Grenada now has to start looking at new arrangements for sourcing with their partners, and they have to work on this. You're absolutely right, with the shippers and the other suppliers of goods and in many instances goods attached to services.
Mm-hmm. So let us talk about the other impacts that you were prefacing a while ago that Grenadians should start looking out for. And again, we have to remember that we are also in an inflationary period as well. If we look at the consumer price index for any Caribbean country, for the basket of goods, obviously it's gone up. But let us talk about those further impacts.
So one of the things we're looking at is, first of all, for those goods that the US, what we call fulfill, and for which they've developed a massive sort of supply chain. You touched on that earlier. And goods that go into the United States for further manufacture, further processing, right? A lot of those, in my first answer, I gave you a sense of what that would look like. But sort of in addition to the inflationary impacts that I've spoken about on the final goods side, we're also likely to see some inflationary impacts, for instance, on raw materials and a number of things that are combined out of the US. Mm-hmm. On our side, we're concerned that when you model this, rather than having an expansion in manufacturing and an expansion in job creation, we see a medium-term shift towards, in fact, where the US's economy has gone, where they've lost some jobs. For many of these, we don't see the jobs coming back. And for many of the jobs that are attached to distribution, and some of these major networks, we see them losing those jobs at a time when they're also cutting the jobs at the state and at the federal level, etc. So we think that what's going to happen is that we will see a decline in remittances. That's one effect. So hold that. But we believe that what's happening with a lot of the uncertainty is also going to lead to a lot of persons essentially adopting a more conservative pattern of expenditure. Disposable incomes then are not going to be spent as liberally. And we think that the first things to go are things like holidays and recreation and vacations, right? Discretionary spending. So we're seeing an impact on the tourism sector and the tourism spend. We're concerned because the Caribbean is one of the highest cost destinations. And we think that in the medium term, certainly not for those bookings already, but perhaps for those bookings already where they're not confirmed, you may see some cancellations. In the medium term, we think two things are going to happen, but it will result in our tourism sector having negative impacts coming from all of this uncertainty, increased cost of the supplying goods and services in the tourism sector, which is going to add to our costs as a destination because we're not like Mexico with a large internal consumption and production market. We think that there's also going to be some other knock-on effects for services attached to this. So in Grenada, the three things would be cost of living, remittances, tourism services, and everything linked to that. Now, if tourism services fall, it impacts your internal demand. Yes. And once your internal demand goes down, right, then we believe that, of course, the economy-wide impacts of that is going to be reverberated throughout our economies. Now, what are the other impacts? We think that as a consequence of all of this government revenue is something we have to look at. And we've already had someone on the program talking about the Citizenship by Investment program. And, I think it was a sober discussion. But we fear that all of this uncertainty and a lot of other noise around it will see us not reach the targets, which is why I said on a previous program that I'm concerned about the revenue assumptions, right? So we no longer have to look at things, in isolated cases. But when you look at it together, I think what we will see is the revenue inflows from the Citizenship by Investment program fall substantially below the levels in the budget. And I listened to my colleague earlier, and of course, he's not coming from an economic perspective. I've looked at this and I can see this falling below $100 million. I think the budget projected $150 million. I'm seeing that falling certainly to under $100 million. And I say so based on my looking at the numbers and looking at what's happening around. So I think we need to be careful about that, because that then means, in addition to all the direct impacts, the impacts on how this will hit government revenue. And of course, given what the government has told us they want to spend, right, it will also mean that we have a growing gap there. And of course, that has implications for debt to GDP. So this is not a moment for the faint-hearted. And I thought it useful to use the opportunity of this program to say that we need to start thinking through the systemic implications of all of this on our Grenada economy. So that's really the fulsomeness of this. It's not a good moment, and I think it really does call for all hands on deck, which is why I applauded what the colleague said earlier, and I said so on a previous program, on making the program more accessible to Grenadian investments. Good move, right time, absolutely required. Whether it's sufficient or not, I think it's going to be an open question, but I rather suspect in the medium term, it's not going to be, so we may have to start looking at some alternatives.
Looking at, but in the process of looking at alternatives, Dr. Antoine, major agencies, Standard & Poor's, for example, JP Morgan, for example, they have been revising their predictions for a full-on recession in 2025 for estimates as high as 60%. So yes, while we're looking at those alternatives, that other variable, that other threat of recession, that variable of recession is something that is also looming large.
I couldn't agree with you more. And when I say looking at alternatives, I mean looking at various alternative scenarios, including the scenarios that we have in the budget. I think it's early, but I think we need to start looking very rapidly at how we look at a budget that is radically different, because we are facing a world now, and I did say a world now that is different to the world in December 2023. Of course, the budget in December 2024. Of course, the budget was read in March, which is why I think I made the point that I think I was concerned about some of what I read into the assumptions of the budget. There's no flaw in the technical experts who prepared this. We just need to start looking at some more scenarios across the board where this is concerned. At the end of it, let me just answer you directly. There is a tendency to the downside. There's no question about that. And because there's a tendency to the downside, in addition to Standards & Poor's, there's something called the Volatility Index. And that is pretty much off the scale as a consequence of what's happening in the United States. Again, uncertainty, lack of confidence. So whether it's going to lead to increased investment or declining investment, I think it's going to tend to declining investments. When we look at alternatives, you're absolutely right in saying, we're not going to have very many easy alternatives. So we need to start looking at how do we get our domestic production up more? How do we start looking at changing the source of our imports towards partners, where rather than it going through the United States or them having a capacity to supply or needs directly, we can essentially start shifting those. All of those are the alternatives we now need to start looking at. How do we leverage financing more at home so that we can buffer some of the fallout because we don't want that taking place? How does government start looking at its own budget process to see where we can start cutting expenditure? And there's some issues there that we need to be concerned about. So you are absolutely right. When we start from where we are today, you and I discussing this, looking at the alternatives, when we land at a place where there is a tremendous risk towards the downside. And we need to be very concerned about that.
Let us talk about geopolitically now, ameliorating those impacts in the context of, and I know I said it in jest earlier about being a conga line of sycophants going to the White House, because this is what it seems to me, Dr. Antoine. This is sort of this is my interpretation of it, a mob boss shakedown. So I would instill fear in you, but if you negotiate with me, I will grant you those favors that you request as long as you stay in my good graces. This is what it appears to me. So does the private sector organization, have you been having conversations with Caricom? Mia Motley delivered a very sobering address over the over this weekend, I believe on Friday, about where we are. But, are we going to be having those conversations with the White House around the impact of these things on us, of this tariff?
Thank you. So I know that the heads have had some frank discussions with the Secretary of State when he visited. I know too that Prime Minister Motley, in her capacity as the chair of Caricom, she has been in contact with the President of the United States through formal communication. We are trying to leverage our ambassadors. In fact, when I met on the occasion of presenting oral evidence to the USTR, I met myself with the caucus of ambassadors, and we are bringing them into the know on where some of the sensitivities are. And a lot of them, I believe, are fully aware of the engagements we need to have. This is a difficult time. So let me go back to what you said, because it's not lost on me beating a conga line sort of thing to the White House and making unilateral concessions. I have to believe that our community at this stage is perhaps united on this issue. And our community understands that in addition to all that we're talking about, we're also talking about how every single region now is looking more inwardly within the region, not just with the United States, from where many countries are saying, look, yes, they may be our largest trading partners, but we recognize we need to diversify. In that full, you call it the geopolitical context, in that geopolitical context, it is not optimal for any one country to approach the United States for unilateral concessions, because clearly the philosophy now is moving away from, sort of the concentrated trade with the US, though they remain important, but looking more intra-regionally at what we do amongst ourselves, one, and secondly, what we do in terms of South-South trade. I want to say trade, not just cooperation, which is the government term, but South-South trade. How do we get firms in Brazil to work with firms in Trinidad and Tobago? How do we get firms in Chile and Argentina to work with firms in Caricom? So there are two things happening. One is that I think this is causing geopolitically a rethink, including a rethink that we're forced to do. We didn't invite it, yeah? But it's also causing the private sector to recognize that in addition to what government's doing, not that you're breaking step, but you now need to start some engagements and alignments as a private sector, right? That will drive trade and economic and business relationships, right? Which may be faster than we're able to see governments do. And that's taking place. Those conversations are taking place. But I'm happy about the bellwether that you're signaling this morning about individual states breaking rank and essentially trying to get a sort of one-upmanship advantage on others.
And let us talk about, and of course, I'll give you an opportunity for closing comments. The methodology, Dr. Antoine, I'm going back to this methodology. So, for example, Ghana, 38%, I believe, which I believe is one of the highest in the region. Trinidad, 30 or 35% or thereabouts. Does the methodology make sense to you?
So Guyana, 35%. Clearly, there's an analytical problem that needs to be worked out. So let me that's answering the question. Does the answer make sense? So does the answer make sense? No. Let me work backwards. Does the methodology make sense? The methodology doesn't make sense because you're talking about states that are small and micro, that you have no advantage because they already have a deficit with you. You have a massive surplus with them. The question becomes, having lectured myself for many years, what is the problem you're trying to cure? What are you solving for? You begun by saying you're solving for a deficit, right?
Yes.
So if you have a surplus with us, then we don't become part of the, let me say, solution set that you're trying to get at. But okay, so we depart from that rationale. And we then start asking ourselves, well, at the end of it, how is that going to solve the problem that you begun asking, that you need to find an answer to? And when you start looking at 10% for Caricom as a whole, Guyana, as I said, it's a matter that has to be worked out in terms of analysis, because the Guyanese numbers and the numbers from the US government are different. That's the first one. Trinidad is at 10%, but what you've done smartly is that the United States has exempted all of the sectors that they believe they have a strategic interest in,
including oil and gas.
So they've exempted oil and gas, but in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, they've not exempted ammonia. They've not exempted UAN, which is urea, ammonium, and nitrate. They've not exempted methanol, and those things have to be worked out because those are major inputs into the president's, America First energy strategy. So there are things to be cleaned up there too. At the end of the day, though, I was coming to the point by saying that driving these tariffs on CARICOM will just cause them geopolitically and out of necessity to forge new relationships with other countries, other supply lines. And what that will do is that it will just weaken the US's economic and trade influence in our region because the surplus will come down. In short, you have a healthy surplus and you're driving countries to form relationships that will diminish the surplus, which really is the problem you're trying to solve, which didn't exist. So you've actually created a problem for yourself by weakening your trade advantage with CARICOM that you had before, right? Which really is contrary to what you set out to do in the first case. So I mean, it is really a moment where I think, certainly as an economist, I don't recognize the analysis that I'm seeing from the U.S. government. I had the benefit, though, of beginning my own analytical work on trade, working on U.S. Canada and U.S. Mexico free trade agreement, and the analysis that I see now is really far from the quality of analysis that I expected to see at this level. But let's see if there is an opportunity to revisit it.
Well, let's see, because again, from day to day, you have so much volatility. And I mean, we're talking about those impacts on CARICOM and with everything that's happening economically that will happen to us. But Americans seem to think that tariffs stick it to other people. A tariff will be a tax on the American people because consumers, the businesses are going to pass that cost on to the consumer. That's basic economics. I'm going to start to sound like the guy on Squawk Box, but that's basic economics, folks. Okay, it's yes, it's a geopolitical cudgel in many respects, but who do you think they're going to be passing that cost on to? To the consumer. So that cost of your iPhone is $1,000 that you paid $1,000 for might now be almost $2,500.
Absolutely.
So I want us to understand and appreciate that as well. While at the same time, and there are talks of another tax break, who do you think will be getting that tax relief? It will not be the middle class American. It will be those in the 1%, right? So I want us to make that a point known as well. Dr. Antoine, I'll go over to you, sir, for some closing comments. So get to the next segment.
No, I am completely all hands on deck as a CPSO.
Yes.
Myself and my colleagues, and I'm happy that the heads created the opportunity for the private sector to have this institution to leverage the full capacity of the private sector with the leadership of heads to solve these problems that I don't believe member states on their own, without full involvement from certainly the private sector and civil society, are going to be in a position to solve optimally. So I think that's the first thing. Secondly, we are deep in analysis. We believe that this is a time for deep reflection, driven by analysis first, and then driven by sober strategy, which takes into account the immediate, the short, and the sort of medium to long-term scenarios. And I think heads certainly have given a signal that they're doing that. And the final thing is that our population needs to now understand that we need to brace for difficult times. We need to get by a lot of these sort of issues that have divided us from leveraging the full potential of our private sector and our people to solve some of these problems by producing more, by becoming more efficient at home, and by forging alliances across the region. And that's really what I want to leave with you, because one of the problems I think that we've seen is in the face of the decline in intra-regional trade over the last several years and the political messaging around it, we've not seen a lot of action on the ground. And we now need to see a lot more boots on the ground at the domestic level, rather than just us cursing the wind. about what we're waiting, the impending crisis coming from the US. We need to produce more. The numbers from Grenada concern me in terms of production and exports. And I think we really have to have a national sit down on how we deal not just with this crisis, but how we position ourselves, because things are not going to become easier. Thank you so much for this.
Yes, George Brizan had a saying that we have to band our bellies in these hard economic times. So, Dr. Antwine, thank you so much for appearing on the program this week.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Dr. Patrick Antwine, he joined us this week again to articulate how these tariffs are going to impact our already stretched thin pocketbooks. The impacts are going to be significant and severe. And, it will be a time for us to gird our loins and because this is going to be a rough ride. We really have to buckle up and fasten our seatbelts with everything that's happening these days. So we will come back for the final segment of the program with Mr. Jervis Dabrio. Callistra Farrier was supposed to be joining us, but unfortunately she had a previous engagement. She will not be here, but we will take our final break of the day and come back for the final segment of the program. This is the Bubb Report, folks. Please stand by.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific Section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Well, tonight in this ZNS exclusive, we take a closer look at a company making headlines across social media, Creators Alliance Limited. While the platform claims to be a revolutionary force in digital content creation and marketing, concerns are mounting over its legitimacy after hundreds of Bahamians woke up Wednesday morning to find they had been removed from Creative Alliance Limited groups and were unable to access their invested funds. Many are now afraid they've been scammed out of thousands. In this report, we hear from a young man who warned others not to join, explaining the red flags he saw, while others share why they took the chance.
They decided to crash and go crazy on April 1st, which was April Fool's Day. I think that is sad but poetic.
What appeared to be one of the biggest financial breakthroughs in recent times, Creators Alliance Limited, CA, is now facing increasing scrutiny. The global short video content platform appears to have followed a troubling pattern reminiscent of investment scams. Users were required to invest a certain amount of money to join the platform with the promise of generating income by completing daily tasks, such as watching, liking, or sharing videos. They were also encouraged to refer new members, further boosting their potential earnings. For weeks, it seemed that CA was delivering on its promises until the end of March. That's when members were unable to withdraw their earnings, leading to an official notice from CA stating that withdrawals could be restarted on March 31st, with all salaries to be credited to user accounts within 72 hours. This notice, however, did little to ease growing concerns. The CA Grand Bahama Facebook page posted a warning urging users not to upgrade or join the platform at this time, citing skepticism and red flags.
When you would ask any sort of questions about it, people would just decide to deflect the questions and talk about, hey, just shut up, just get some of this money.
Nelson Strawn Jr., founder of Crypto Nukes, an educational community in the Bahamas, created a post sharing why he believes CA is a scam.
The site was extremely cheap, despite they said that they are $1 billion company. They had 35 different companies invested inside of it, but yet no one could name any of them. The owners of Creators Alliance, you could never find out who they were.
As if that wasn't alarming enough, early Wednesday morning, members were shocked to find themselves removed from their CA WhatsApp groups without any explanation. Rumors of a system crash quickly spread across social media. ZNS News visited the CA office in Grand Bahama, where a person unwilling to identify herself declined to provide any information. Concerned members arrived at the office seeking answers, but were left in the dark.
People coming in, asking for their money. At the end of the day, we cannot blame the ones that work for the company or whatever. At the end of the day, you take your money, you come here, and you go in there and you join. Nobody actually, we don't call ZNS when we walk in there. At the end of the day, we can't blame nobody, because at the end of the day, we take our money, walk in there, Miss Man, Miss Woman, and join.
Packed meetings and high expectations have now turned into pleas for authorities to investigate. Similar concerns are emerging across the Caribbean, with other countries where Creators Alliance operated reporting issues. The Financial Intelligence Authority, FIA, in St. Lucia has issued a warning to its residents, while Grenada's Cybersecurity Incident Response Team is urging citizens to stay away. The Financial Crimes Unit in the Bahamas has been alerted and is currently investigating.
And folks, that was reporting there on the Creators Alliance scam, Ponzi scheme, dubious pyramid marketing scheme that promoted itself as a platform for video content creation that promised lucrative returns for those who invest in its packages. Now, according to the company's website, quote, "We are the world's leading short video content creation and distribution platform, adhering to the mission of let the world see more beautiful. The platform mainly provides copyright business, operation services, content promotion services, content distribution services, AI intelligent advertising services, etc. It is committed to providing users with a simple, fast, efficient, and high-value content open platform," unquote. Sounds like TikTok, if you were to ask me. Now, social media activity suggests that Creators Alliance has been operating in Grenada and in the Eastern Caribbean for several months. And of course, as we just saw that Bahamas report, in the Bahamas as well, and in other Northern Caribbean territories. Now, while some users claim to have successfully withdrawn their initial investments, in addition to subsequent withdrawals, others remain skeptical, with many expressing concerns over the legitimacy of the operation. The platform appears to have been founded in 2020, at least in its current iteration. Now, here to make sense of the collapse of this very elaborate Ponzi scheme is Mr. Jervis Dabrio of the CSERT. I call him the tech evangelist. Mr. Dabrio, you are out there evangelizing and spreading the word of the risks of the World Wide Web and all of the nuances that come with it. But Mr. Dabrio, you brought attention to this issue back in January, and you warned people about this. So the first question I would ask you is, at what point did you get an inkling that this Creative Alliance content creation Ponzi scheme, quote unquote, wealth creation platform there was something amiss with it?
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Bubb, for having me on, and greetings to all your viewers and listeners, wherever you are. I approach anything that comes across my desk with a high level of skepticism. When it comes to the judicial system, the court system, they say you are innocent until proven guilty. In my line of work, it goes the other way around. So if you send an entity and you want us at the National CSERT to check it, when it comes on my desk, it is approached as malicious, as a scam, as nefarious, until it proves that it isn't. right? So when Creators Alliance was brought to my attention in December, of course, I was on vacation, due back from vacation on the 6th of January. And I had decided, you know what, I am on vacation. I am really not going to be doing any work outside of my gardening and just having some fun with my family. But I did put in a little bit of time looking into the entity. And there were so many red flags that my first order of business on the 6th of January was to flag it on our platforms and was to issue the advisory that Grenadians should not get involved in it. Now, the advisory did not say alleged. Um, we don't do alleged, right? If we identify something
Journalists
as a
do allege
scam,
it.
it is a scam, and I stand by it. I think the news clip you played just before we got started with the conversation, it misrepresents or it misrepresented the Grenada National CSIRT's advisory in this entire thing. It sounds as though the advisory was issued this week or last week. It does not say that the advisory from the Grenada National CSIRT was on the 6th of January when nobody else had said anything on it. Now, I've always been a little disgusted when people come after a hurricane and say, oh, I had a dream. After a flood, oh, I had a vision. Listen,
I
if you
predicted
had a
this was going to
vision,
happen.
right. If you had a vision or a dream or a prediction, it must be made known before the thing happens, right? So you can't tell me, hey, listen, this is a scam after it goes belly up. And I think that is why when it comes to the Grenadian public, I think I do feel a bit saddened that even though we put the stuff out, so many people disregarded it and they still went ahead and joined because there are people who joined in March when that was already out there. So, as I said, it came across, it is approached with skepticism, and then there were just so many red flags. Everything pointed to it being a Ponzi scheme of a multi level marketing nature, right? So it wasn't just Ponzi. They did a good job at how they presented the scam, but it was malicious from the get go based on what we've seen.
Now, what were some of the telltale signs? Let us go into specifics now. The telltale signs of that sort of a cyber Ponzi scheme that when you saw it, you said, this is not looking right.
Right. So, and I think this is something that people can actually learn from, right? If somebody approaches you and say, hey, you can make X amount, you can make quite a huge sum of money by putting your money in or by doing this or that, whatever. One of the questions you must ask is, how is the money being made? So that money that I am going to enjoy as a return or as profit, how is that being made? And up to this point, no one, even the so-called managers in Creators Alliance, could answer that question. So I'll tell you what I found. Creators Alliance claimed that they had partnerships with other large streaming services, that they were partnership with TikTok. Couldn't find anything to corroborate that. With Vimeo, nothing to corroborate that. With YouTube, nothing to corroborate that. So some of the claims were wrong. And then they were offering returns in terms of the videos that people viewed up to about $6 per view. Now, Google, who owns YouTube, offers less than 10 cents per view. And we know Google is an advertising company. They make their money from advertising, right? So if Google can't give someone with 10 million viewers or subscribers $1 per view, how could you do it? And especially when you already lied about some of the claims. Then there were the websites. Now, when you look at a company like Amazon, Amazon is Amazon.com in the US. Amazon is Amazon.co.uk, or is it .uk.co in the UK, but it's still Amazon. In Canada, it's a similar thing. It's Amazon dot whatever. That is not what I found. What I found were completely different websites, names that had nothing to do with Creators Alliance. So even now, no one can point out that website that says Creators Alliance. In addition to that, it came across very fishy that the link that was shared with the investors, quote unquote, in St. Vincent, for example, was different from what was shared or circulated in Grenada. It was different from what was shared with the Bahamians. And that is not something, again, that you find legitimate entities doing. And then there was who owned these websites? Who are the owners? And that was shrouded in secrecy. What I was able to say, or what I said back in January was this. Now, I can't remember which program. I was on so many different
You were
programs
all over.
in January
I remember seeing it as well.
leave
Yes.
it alone. That I remember one host asking, is this the black guys? And I remember saying, no. Everything is pointing to this having a lot of Asian essence and ingredients in it. So imagine the smile on my face when I saw this posting that went out with this name that looks very Asian. But this is in April when we warned off it back in January. Right. So as I said, all these different red flags. And then there was, because I tried to join, right? Not to invest, but as part of the analysis. And what I found is when I went to any of those sites, I could not join unless I had a referral, someone referred me. So I had to have a referral code from somebody who was already in there, which suggests that in order to get in, I had to be entering under somebody. Now, not all pyramids are scams, but when you put all these different pieces together, there was no doubt in my mind, there was no doubt from the Grenada National Cybersecurity Incident Response Team that this was a scam, that this was a multi-level marketing Ponzi scheme. So I hear people talking about wealth creation and all that, and I get that some people made money, but that is how these scams work. You think of Bernie Madoff, people made millions of dollars, and I believe over $50 billion was lost. You look at FTX, which is one of the larger, more recent scams, of course, of a crypto nature. And again, people made millions of dollars, but there are billions of dollars that have been lost.
Now, let us talk about, in this report here, the Bahamian reporter articulated how law enforcement partners there, as well as in St. Lucia, are looking to investigate this matter. I know that Callistra, who was supposed to be here, but she had other engagements, said that she was working on looking at that angle of it. What happens when CSIRT gets a report like that? What conversations do you have with local law enforcement? Because, of course, your agency, you do not have investigative powers of the punitive nature that falls within the law enforcement branch of government. So what cooperation do you have, if you can share, in respect of that? And then the second part of that question is this on Grenadian law enforcement's radar, FIU's radar, and things like that?
Right. So there is a very good, excellent relationship between us, the National CSIRT, the FIU, CID, GAFIN, Caricom Impacts, RSS, that's the regional security services out of Barbados. We have a very, very good relationship in terms of information sharing and support across these different entities and agencies. So depending on what comes to us or what is found from the investigation at the National CSIRT, we make a determination in terms of who need to know this, who should get this information, right? And so there is paper trail that shows that this information went to Caricom Impacts. As a matter of fact, in one of my interviews in January. I believe it was on either GBN or on Ride Along Live. I pointed out that I was expecting an official sort of release from Caricom Impacts based on the information that we presented to them, what we have found. Unfortunately, that official release did not come. It was never put out. I found that there were several entities, whether it is financial investigation units or what, who are very cautious to not name the entity as malicious. So they were not willing to say Creators Alliance is a Ponzi scheme. But of course, we were willing to do it because everything pointed to that. We also understood that in all scams, people will make money. Only a very, very stupid scammer would start out by scamming you from the get-go, right? Especially something of this magnitude, they need for you to entice people. They need people to see things moving, to develop a level of trust and confidence. And in some cases, it may mean actually putting an office or setting up some sort of space on land where you can say, hey, yes, there is this office, there are people working there, so it must be legit. I've seen, and just Friday, I did a couple investigations for a couple persons who reached out, and in one case, the entity that is selling the vehicle, they send the person a registration number, and the registration number, it exists in that country, just not for that company. So I think some of the deep digging that should have happened did not. But I mean, at that time, no one was saying I'm not getting money, right?
Well, so
we were able to put it out because of what was happening.
Yeah, but Mr. Dabra, you said something here which I'm still at a loss to make sense of. While you are going on the limb and saying that this is clearly a Ponzi scheme, that this is a scam, law enforcement authorities are not doing the same thing. Can you, I mean, I don't know if you can, but have they articulated to you why they would not be on the same page with you with respect to warning the public about this?
So, I mean, you have to understand with law enforcement, if there are no complainants, they do not move on certain things as we at the National CSIRT would, right? The National CSIRT, when it was set up in Grenada, it was not just about raising awareness and pointing these things out and helping people to be safe online, but it was also about not having law enforcement being bogged down by any and everything that happens to someone while they operate in the virtual space. There are certain incidents that are not criminal. And those that come to us that are of a criminal nature, then yes, naturally we'll have to pass it on. So why didn't they put their stamp of approval and say, hey, the National CSIRT said it is a scam. We're going to put this out as part of our release saying yes, or maybe just do a little bit of digging and see, hey, some things were off. They should have maybe done that as well. I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses because, frankly speaking, I think the ball was dropped across the region on this, especially with the level of sharing that was done from the National CSIRT here. The ball was dropped, Dr. Bubb, not by the Grenada National Cybersecurity Incident Response Team.
Well, yeah, because you were out there alerting people, and then some people, I believe, in an MTV report, they started cussing you out.
Not just that one.
Hundreds of people.
Not just
speaking of that one, but let us talk about accountability, because one of the people involved in this was the First Lady of the Agape Church. She's the wife of one Pastor Devon Rache, who, in Calistro Faria's report, admitted that she, let me be clear because I do not want to be sued, especially by a faith-based organization in Grenada, given the relationship or the lack thereof that I have with some of these faith-based organizations. But she said that, she admitted, and again, I'm quoting Callistra's report, that she knew the scheme was risky, but participated in it to gain financial benefits. And so I'm teeing up the quote from this lady to ask the question, should the people who are, shall we say, the ones who are inviting people into these schemes not be held accountable for inviting people into these schemes in the first place, knowing that there might be a risk associated with it?
So, Dr. Bob, you're quoting Callistra, which is fine. I am not going to quote Callistra. I can quote the goodly lady from her multiple social media
I was just
posts,
being careful as a
because
journalist here, but go ahead. Yes, go
I
ahead, please.
found it to be very irresponsible. So I do have multiple screenshots, captures of some of the things that were posted. I think it is instructional here to explain this particular. There is a post that she had up where she said, "I have not invited anyone, but there are so many people under me," something to that effect, saying that she was making a tidy sum because there were so many persons under her. And in one of the posts, she shared the link that people can follow. In that link was her referral code. So maybe she didn't know that the code was in there. I'm not going to give her a pass on that. But anyone who used that link was basically entering the Ponzi scheme under her, right? And I have to, I found it very responsible, so much so that I think on one of my appearances in January, I said that if I had my way, I believe it was on Ride Along Live, if I had my way, bringing anyone into these schemes when the information has been put out by the authorities saying it is a scam, you should be held responsible, you should be held accountable, whether it's silver bracelets or it is just a very harsh warning. Something should happen. I don't know if anything along those lines are going to happen. I don't know if the persons who are encouraged and enticed within the local community to join, if they are going to, go to the FIU, get lawyers involved. I don't know. But it brings me to this point, Dr. Bob, that this level of respect and when they say jump, we jump, that we give to many people within certain spaces, especially within the religious and political space, we need to reevaluate that. This is not the first time that we've seen something like this happen. Back in 2019 into 2020, we had the Blessing Loom. That was the susu where you pay once, you get your money, you do not have to pay again. So you pay, let's say, $1,000, you get, I think, was $12,000 or $15,000, and you don't have to pay anything ever again. So just pay once and get that money. And that was pushed heavily within the religious circle. I think I've done several videos on that since then. So I do have a little issue when some of these people are pushing it. I should also point out here that another one that was flagged in January was Ride BNB. And that one again was pushed by someone in the religious space. Of course, that one has since gone dormant from our space because, in her case, when the information was presented, she decided, hey, I'm going to take a look at it through objective lens. She pulled out, discouraged whoever were in there, encouraged whoever were in there to get out, and we're good. But as I said, it was pushed by someone who, again, we look up to. Maybe those things would not catch me because, hey, listen, I don't care who you are, whatever you're presenting, it has to prove that it is legit. I'm not taking your word for it.
So much to unpack here. Have you had any contact with folks who were victims of this, who invested a lot of money into this thing, who are now reaching out to CISA to say, you know what, I willingly, on the advice of First Lady X, First Lady Y, invested $1,000 or $2,000 into this thing, or I spoke to auntie and uncle about this, and they lent me money to do this. What has been the fallout that you've been hearing directly? We know that folks have been saying that they're losing money, but have you heard from anyone?
So you say that, and it's like I just experienced a falling on the inside. The thing. I if it was $1,000, it would not feel as bad as it feels. But I'm getting 12,000. I'm getting 15,000. I'm getting 25,000. Right? A lot of money went into that. There are people who actually took loans. Now I have to say this, and I have said it in my personal capacity. For those who saw the information, who heard, and I don't understand how you can live in Grenada, be on social media, and you did not see the information. I was on WeFM multiple times, GBN multiple times, MTV multiple times. All over, I was on the narrative multiple times. Now, people pay a lot of attention to Ride Along Live when it's some kind of melee. I was on Ride Along Live for over an hour speaking on that. So if after hearing all that, you did not take a step back and at least look at the information, and you get burnt, then I can't feel sad for you, because you said a lot of really nasty things when the information was presented. But for the people who did not know, man, I feel it for those persons. I have had people reach out from Ohio, from Texas, from Cyprus, from the Bahamas, from St. Vincent, from St. Lucia. You have people from Grenada, from Caricom. I mean, my phone has been going for the last few days with people reaching out. And I mean, in terms of those outside of our jurisdiction, I have to let them know, hey, listen, the Grenada National CSUT was set up by government to help Grenadians. And while our advisory may be applicable based on what it is, and we may be able to offer some level of support, understand that ultimately you have to get in touch with the authority within your space. All right. If there isn't any authority there to deal with, then there is nothing that we can do. For the people, the locals who have lost money, you need to report it to the FIU. As I said, if you were enticed, and so maybe have a conversation with your lawyer, because I think we really need for something like this not to happen again. I mean, I have at least one of my very, very good friends who got involved in it. And when I spoke to him, he told me, Dabs, I know it's a scam, but I think I can get in, make some money, and get out. I haven't spoken to him since this happened, because I don't think I can speak with him and not say, aha, I told you so. You know, that's what is happening, and it's across not just the Caribbean, but it goes well beyond that.
Yes, certainly worldwide. And Mr. Dabrio, thank you for doing, it's a quote now, the Lord's work is what they say, for, informing people.
Dr. Bob, we need to revisit that, right? Because
well, this
what
is true.
I am
This is
doing
true.
is the Lord's work, and what was done was the Lord's work by his messengers, then is it the same Lord?
Is it? Well,
Or is it the case
we can have an entire conversation about that, and I assure you, you may not like to hear my views on that question, but
you may be surprised where our views converge on some of these things. But Dr. Bob, before I run, I want to say
yes,
this, right? Because there are others that we flagged as well. From the National CSUT. As a matter of fact, there are a couple that was sent in yesterday, and I got one that came in this morning. Of course, this morning I'm not looking at anything today. To be very honest, it's gardening and family and just relaxing a bit. So I imagine that there are a few that may end up on the running list that we have on social media. So if you approach on any of these, just check the list. The list started in January, identified verified scams targeting Grenadians, and just don't. But it comes back again to anybody approaching you. How is the money being made? What does your gut say? Is it too good to be true? If anybody says there is no risk, it is guaranteed 100%, run and run fast. There are no investments that have zero risk. There is always going to be some level of risk. All right. And then just ask the right questions. Who is behind this? What company? Where are they based? And these other things. And what you found is people could not answer it. And finally, Dr. Bob, and this goes back to how this thing spread throughout the region. We need to check our confirmation bias, and we need to, in some cases, get out of the echo chambers that we are in. That is what was done to entice people to go to the next package and bring people in. You had these WhatsApp groups that were created. We're seeing these things happening on Telegram as well, where they bring you into these spaces and they bombard you with screenshots of people making money and so forth, and pushing this like mindset within that space. Nobody else is able to say anything. If you ask a question that does not align with whatever is being said, you're thrown out. This right there, this cultish behavior, is what I think led to a certain extent to people losing as much as they have lost, because they were not willing to listen to anything else. There are people, I'm sure, who search online, but they were searching for reasons why they should get involved, not questioning whether this is malicious. And so in some cases, that makes a big difference. Creators Alliance scam, Creators Alliance get rich, was going to give you completely different results at the beginning of March. Now I believe any Creators Alliance search is going to say Ponzi scheme, boss, money loss, something we warned of in January. So people, next time we put something out, pay attention. Yeah, like and follow us on social media. If you're not part of our WhatsApp group, definitely you need to join that. Even though people were encouraged by a talk show person earlier this year to get out if they're in the group, because I was mining their data and rubbish. I mean, I get a lot of rubbish coming my way, man.
Well, I do not have a bottle of champagne, but I saw you with a bottle of champagne on your non-alcoholic champain.
That was for those who had so much to say
they had a lot to say. Yes, well,
yeah. The credibility was attacked, and I think people did not separate the person from the
message
entity. And it was really nasty. But I did get the last laugh. Hopefully, I don't get to laugh again for any of the others that we identified.
That may crop
Dr.
up.
Bob,
Yes.
also, just Friday, we were able, from the National CSIRT, to save just over 10,000 US. Two persons almost lost, collectively, just over 10,000 US, one for a vehicle, one for an engine. So again, just reach out, just send the stuff. We're going to take a look at it. We will provide feedback. Remember, it is free for you. Of course, it is not a free service because somebody pays me. Taxpayers pay me. It is a government entity. But reach out and let us check it and keep you safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Dabrio, thank you so much for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Viewers and listeners, this has been yet another edition of the Bubb Report. Please tell us what you think. We would love to hear your comments. Is this a program that is worthwhile and relevant in the national community? You let us know. Also, let us know where you are viewing the program from. We would love to hear from you. Where are you watching the Bubb Report from? Which part of Grenada are you watching the Bubb Report from? Are you in St. David's, of course? Are you in St. George's? Are you in Caricom and PT Martinique? Those of you in Maryland. So just drop a comment in the comment section before we leave. We do want to appreciate also all our viewers and listeners who continue to join us every week for our hosting of this program. I see Kinda is here. I know that Kinda is in Brooklyn. Sonia Lessie also is in Brooklyn, New York, Montreal. Karen Park is in Montreal. Of course, I know that Margaret is in Brooklyn by way of Manjaloo. We have Don Henry, who is listening from Boston. We have Tabitha Felix, who is listening from Paris. Then we have an Andrea Pascal with a Canadian emoji there. So I suspect you're in some part of Canada. Are you in BC, Montreal, Toronto? Where are you? Bob from Brooklyn. We have Curlin Beswick. Happy belated birthday, brother. You're joining us from Florida as well. Leonora Isaac is watching from Houston. Alistair Charles has been an ardent watcher of the Bubb Report. I know he's in Grenada. Alistair is a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. Cadella, I don't know where Cadella is. Somebody's Aki saying we have somebody from Willis in New York there. Mr. Lewis. We have Oklahoma. We have Queens, New York. Ingrid is in Queens, New York. Curlin Francis from Atlanta. We have D. Franklin from the United Kingdom. Queens, North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, Marlene Pascal. Thank you, Marlene, for joining us. Please remember to like and share and subscribe to the platform. Mark Coutain from Winnipeg. Of course, the Grenadian diaspora is so broad and vast. One of these days, I would certainly have to do a road trip. We can do a Bubb Report road trip on the road. Leonard, Four Roads. Big up Four Roads. That's my neck of the woods. I grew up on Four Roads, aka Grenville Street, for the most seasoned folks. Then we have Patricia from England, Jennifer Lawrence from New York, Harold Douglas from Belmont in St. George's, and of course Lydia James is joining us from Toronto. So folks, thank you all for continuing to be ardent viewers of the Bubb Report. This next month will be our 5th anniversary. We'll be having a 5th anniversary event down in St. George's at the Grenada Trade Center on Thursday, the 15th of May. It will be a memorial lecture in honor of the late George Grant, Lou Smith, and Leslie Pear. I will be publishing much more information on that special 5th anniversary event that we will be having. Of course, given the quality of this program, you can expect that the event would also be of a top-notch, top-tier quality as well, because I do not put my name behind anything that is not of a specific quality. So stay tuned for more details on that. And of course, we will be keeping you updated on who the guest speaker will be. And of course, this month as well will be the anniversary of the passing of the late, great George Grant. And we'll be having a program to remember his life and legacy in broadcasting and media in Grenada. So folks, thank you all for continuing to support the program. Thank you to all our viewers and listeners, as always. And we will see you next week for another installment of the Bubb Report. So thank you again for viewing, and we will see you next week. Remember to like and share this week's live stream. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.